Some people believe that kindness is a choice, but for Archer Pembroke, it was the only thing keeping him alive after losing his daughter. On Christmas Eve, when he saw a pregnant woman alone in the snow outside a closed diner, starving and abandoned, he couldn't just drive past. He gave her a meal and offered her a ride to shelter, but the storm closed every door in town. So he brought her home. She sat at his kitchen table that night and told him why she'd been left behind. Then she mentioned her mother's name. In that moment, everything changed. How could this stranger know things about his daughter that no one else did? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, subscribe because tomorrow we have something special waiting. The hardware store on Main Street had been in the Pembroke family for 37 years. Archer's father had opened it back when Frost Hollow was still a thriving lumber town, before the mill closed and half the population drifted away to find work elsewhere. Now it stood as one of the few remaining businesses on a street that had seen better days, its faded green awning and creaking wooden floors, a testament to stubbornness more than prosperity. Archer arrived every morning at 7:30, unlocked the heavy glass door with its cheerful bell, and went through the same ritual he'd performed for the past 3 decades. Coffee first, brewed in the back office using the same dented percolator his father had used. Then the lights, row by row, illuminating aisles of nails and screws, paint cans and power tools, garden supplies and seasonal decorations that never quite sold out. He was 52 years old, though some days he felt ancient. His hair had gone mostly grey after Dinah died 4 years ago, and the lines around his eyes had deepened considerably last winter when Iris, his bright, beautiful daughter, had been killed by a drunk driver on Route 47. 28 years old, her whole life ahead of her, gone in an instant because someone thought they could make it home after too many beers at the Timber Lodge. The photograph in his wallet was the only one he carried now. Iris at her college graduation, her smile wide and genuine, her dark hair catching the sunlight. He touched it sometimes during slow afternoons, running his thumb over the plastic sleeve until the gesture became as automatic as breathing. "You're doing it again," Beatrice said one afternoon in early December, catching him staring at nothing in particular. Beatrice Kowalski owned the diner 3 doors down, had known Archer since they were kids, racing bikes through these same streets. She was 60 now, her auburn hair streaked with white, her aproned figure as much a part of Main Street as the defunct parking meters. "Doing what?" Archer asked, though he knew. "Disappearing." She set a paper bag on the counter. Lunch, he assumed, though he hadn't asked for any. "Cyrus called me. He'd worried about you." Cyrus was Archer's older brother by 4 years, an accountant who'd moved to Billings decades ago, but still called twice a week to check in. The calls had increased in frequency since Iris died. "Cyrus worries too much," Archer said. "Cyrus worries the right amount." Beatrice fixed him with the look that had made her children confess to broken windows and stolen cookies. "When's the last time you had a real meal? And don't say yesterday, because I know you're lying." Archer couldn't remember. Time had become fluid since last winter, days blending together in a grey haze of opening the store, closing the store, and the empty hours in between. "Christmas is coming," Beatrice continued, her voice softening. "You know you're welcome at our house. The kids would love to see you." "I know. Thank you, but you won't come. I appreciate the offer." She sighed, squeezed his hand across the counter, and left without another word. The bell chimed her departure, leaving him alone again with the fluorescent hum and the smell of sawdust. The house waited for him each evening like a held breath. It was a modest 2-story colonial on Maple Street, white with blue shutters, surrounded by a fence Archer had built himself the summer before Dinah got sick. They'd bought it 30 years ago, when Iris was still a dream, and the future stretched out like an open road. Now it felt like a museum. Dinah's reading glasses still sat on the end table by her favorite chair. Iris's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it. Textbooks on the desk, clothes in the closet, posters of bands he'd never heard of on the walls. He couldn't bring himself to change anything. Some preservation instinct had taken hold, as if altering a single detail would erase them completely. He moved through the rooms like a ghost himself, heating canned soup for dinner, watching television without seeing it, climbing the stairs to a bed that felt too large for one person. The quilt Dinah had made, patches of fabric from Iris's baby clothes, their wedding, family vacations, lay folded at the foot of the bed. He couldn't bear to sleep under it anymore. December wore on. The town transformed itself for the holidays with the determined cheerfulness of a community that refused to acknowledge its own decline. Lights appeared on storefronts, a massive tree went up in the square, and carolers made their rounds, despite the bitter cold that settled over the valley like a weight. Archer went through the motions. He helped customers find the right drill bits and explained the difference between interior and exterior paint. He ate Beatrice's sandwiches and deflected Cyrus's concerned phone calls. He visited the cemetery on Sundays, leaving flowers at 2 graves side by side: Dinah Margaret Pembroke, beloved wife and mother, and Iris Catherine Pembroke, beloved daughter taken too soon. "I don't know how to do this without you," he told them, standing in the snow with his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "Either of you." The headstones offered no answers, only their silent company and the wind moving through the bare branches overhead. Christmas Eve arrived with a vengeance. The weather service had been warning about the storm for days, a massive system sweeping down from Canada, promising 8 to 12 inches of snow and wind chills well below zero. Most of the town had battened down by noon, businesses closing early, families hurrying home to wait it out in warmth and safety. Archer locked the store at 3 o'clock. Only 2 customers had come in all day, both buying rock salt and batteries. The bell chimed its goodbye as he stepped onto the sidewalk, pulling his collar up against the wind that was already howling down Main Street. His truck started reluctantly, the engine protesting the cold. He let it warm up while he scraped ice from the windows, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The town looked abandoned, windows glowing softly behind drawn curtains, smoke rising from chimneys to be torn away by the wind. He drove slowly, windshield wipers fighting the snow that had started falling in earnest. Past the square with its decorated tree swaying dangerously, past the church, where lights blazed inside for a service he wouldn't attend, past the elementary school where Iris had learned to read. The cemetery sat on a hill at the edge of town. He almost didn't stop. The storm was getting worse, visibility dropping, but his hands turned the wheel anyway, guided by routine stronger than common sense. Their graves were already disappearing under fresh snow. He brushed it away from the headstones, placed the small wreaths he'd brought, and stood there longer than he should have, letting the cold seep through his coat until his fingers went numb. "Merry Christmas," he whispered, then turned back to the truck before emotion could overwhelm him entirely. The drive home took him down Main Street one last time. Everything was closed now, even Beatrice's diner dark and shuttered. He was already past it when something made him glance in the rearview mirror. A figure stood in front of the diner's locked door, small, hunched against the wind, barely visible through the swirling snow. Archer's foot moved to the brake without conscious thought. He sat there idling for a long moment, arguing with himself. It was none of his business, probably just someone waiting for a ride. The storm was dangerous and getting worse, but the figure didn't move, and something about the way it hunched there, so alone, so vulnerable, wouldn't let him drive away. He put the truck in reverse and backed up slowly until he was parallel with the diner. Through the passenger window he could see her more clearly now. A young woman, early 20s perhaps, wearing a thin maternity dress completely inadequate for the weather. No coat, no gloves, and unmistakably, heartbreakingly pregnant. Archer rolled down the window. Snow immediately swirled inside, along with wind that stole his breath. "Miss, are you all right?" She turned toward him, and he saw her face, pale, exhausted, with the hollow look of someone who'd been hungry for more than just a day. Her lips were turning blue. Her voice cracked. "I'm waiting for someone. They said they'd come back. How long have you been out here?" "I don't know." "A while. You'll freeze to death." Archer leaned across to push open the passenger door. "Get in, please." She hesitated, survival instinct warring with desperation, then stumbled toward the truck and climbed inside with movements made clumsy by cold and pregnancy. The warmth hit her immediately. She gasped, then started shivering violently as her body remembered what temperature was supposed to feel like. Archer cranked the heat higher and pulled off his own coat, draping it over her shoulders. "When did you last eat?" 2 days, maybe? I'm not sure. 2 days. Pregnant and starving and abandoned in a blizzard. Something in his chest cracked open, some protective wall he'd built around his grief. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much hardship for someone so young. "Iris," she said. "My name is Iris." The name hit Archer like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at this shivering stranger who'd just spoken his daughter's name as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Iris," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "I know it's old-fashioned." She pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders, still trembling. "My mom liked traditional names." Archer forced himself to focus on the immediate problem. This girl, this Iris, needed help, not his complicated grief. "Let me get you something to eat. There's a—" He stopped, looking down the deserted street. Everything was closed. The storm had seen to that. "It's okay," she said quickly. "I can wait until— When's the last time you had water?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Archer pulled out his phone and called Beatrice. It went straight to voicemail. She'd probably already lost power. He tried the church community center next, got the recording about holiday hours. The women's shelter on Ridge Road didn't even ring, just a fast, busy signal that meant the lines were down. The girl, Iris, watched him make the calls with the resigned expression of someone who'd learned not to expect much from the world. When he finally set the phone down, she said, "You don't have to help me. I'll figure something out. In this storm." "Pregnant?" Archer shook his head. "The hospital is 20 miles away, and the roads are getting worse by the minute. Even if we could get there, you're not in labor, are you?" "No, baby's not due for another few weeks." She touched her belly protectively. "I'm just hungry and cold, that's all. I don't need a hospital. What you need is a warm place and a decent meal." Archer put the truck in gear, making a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. "My house is 5 minutes from here. I've got food, heat, and a guest room. You can stay until the storm passes, and we can figure out where you need to go." "I can't. You don't even know me." "I know you're going to freeze if you stay out here." "That's enough." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dashboard light. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she finally nodded. "Just until the storm passes." "Just until then," Archer agreed, though something told him this Christmas Eve was going to change more than just his evening plans. The drive to Maple Street took twice as long as usual. The snow was coming down so hard now that the windshield wipers could barely keep up, and the wind pushed against the truck in gusts that made steering treacherous. Archer drove carefully, hyper-aware of his precious cargo. Not just one life now, but 2. Iris sat silently beside him, her hands resting on her belly, her breath slowly evening out as warmth seeped back into her body. In profile, she looked impossibly young. Too young to be this pregnant, this alone, this abandoned. "Who left you at the diner?" Archer asked, keeping his voice gentle. "A trucker. Said he was heading through Frost Hollow and could give me a ride. I was trying to get to my aunt's place in Idaho." She stared out at the swirling snow. "He stopped for food, told me to wait, and just never came back. I saw his rig pull out an hour later. He left you deliberately." "Yeah." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm used to it." That casual acceptance of cruelty cut deeper than anger would have. Archer's hands tightened on the steering wheel, but he kept his voice steady. "Well, you're safe now. That's what matters." His house appeared through the snow like a haven, its windows dark but welcoming. He pulled into the driveway and helped Iris out of the truck, guiding her carefully up the walk he'd shoveled that morning. The wind tried to tear them away, but they made it to the front door and stumbled inside to blessed warmth and silence. Iris stood in the entryway, dripping melted snow onto the hardwood, and looked around with wide eyes. It was just a regular house, nothing fancy, nothing special, but Archer tried to see it through her perspective. The lived-in furniture, the family photos on the walls, the quilt draped over the couch. The ordinary comforts of a home. "Let me get you some dry clothes," he said. And then food. He led her to the downstairs bathroom first, gave her towels and pointed out where things were, then went upstairs to Iris's room. His hands shook slightly as he opened the door. He hadn't been in here in weeks, but he forced himself inside and found clean sweatpants and a soft flannel shirt that would fit loosely over her pregnancy. When he came back down, she was still standing in the entryway, as if afraid to move further into the house without permission. "Here." He handed her the clothes. "They were my daughter's, she won't mind." "Were?" Iris caught the past tense. "She died last winter. A car accident. I'm sorry." The words were simple but sincere, carrying the weight of someone who understood loss. "I'll be careful with them. Don't worry about that. Take your time getting changed. I'll start dinner." In the kitchen, Archer moved on autopilot, pulling out ingredients for the simplest meal he could manage: canned soup, bread, cheese. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened in the last hour. This stranger in his house, wearing his daughter's clothes, carrying his daughter's name. The universe had a strange sense of humor. He heard the bathroom door open, heard her soft footsteps on the floor. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, transformed by dry clothes and warming skin, Archer's breath caught again. In the better light, he could see her more clearly. Dark hair, fine features, that same exhausted resilience he'd seen in the truck. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "This'll be ready in a minute." She sat carefully, watching him move around the kitchen with the wariness of someone not used to kindness. "You don't have to do all this." "I know." He poured soup into bowls, sliced bread, arranged everything on plates with more care than necessary. "But I'm going to anyway." When he set the food in front of her, she stared at it for a long moment before picking up the spoon with shaking hands. The first bite seemed to break something inside her. She ate slowly at first, then faster, as if afraid the food might disappear. Archer made himself look away, giving her privacy for her hunger. "Thank you," she whispered when she finally paused. "You have no idea what this means." "You're welcome." He sat down across from her with his own bowl, though he had no appetite. "So Idaho? That's where your aunt is?" "Yeah, she's the only family I have left. Mom died 5 years ago, cancer. I've been on my own since then." She took another bite of bread. "I was staying with the baby's father, but when I wouldn't, when I decided to keep the baby, he kicked me out 3 months ago." 3 months? Archer felt anger flare hot in his chest. "You've been homeless for 3 months." "While pregnant. Mostly I stayed at shelters. Sometimes with people I met. I was trying to save enough for a bus ticket to my aunt's, but..." She shrugged. "Things kept happening. Lost my job, got sick. Money just disappeared. Does your aunt know you're coming?" "I called her last week from a payphone. She said she'd help however she could, but she doesn't have much either." Iris met his eyes. "I'm not looking for charity. I just need a chance to get on my feet before the baby comes. That's not charity. That's basic human decency." Archer pushed the breadbasket closer to her. "Eat as much as you want. There's plenty." She took another slice, and he watched her eat with the satisfaction of providing something so simple, yet so necessary. Outside, the storm howled and raged, but inside this kitchen there was warmth and food and safety. For tonight, that was enough. "You can stay in the guest room upstairs," Archer said when she'd finally stopped eating. "Clean sheets, warm blankets. Bathrooms next door. Stay as long as the storm lasts." "Just until it passes," she agreed. But as Archer showed her up the stairs and watched her disappear into the guest room that had once been his daughter's bedroom, he had the strangest feeling that some doors, once opened, could never quite be closed again. Archer woke on Christmas morning to a sound he hadn't heard in over a year, someone moving around in his kitchen. For a disoriented moment, he thought it was Dinah, that the last 4 years had been a nightmare, and he'd wake to find her humming over the stove. Then memory reasserted itself, and he remembered the girl, Iris. He pulled on his robe and went downstairs to find her standing at the counter, carefully arranging slices of toast on a plate. The coffee maker was burbling, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. She'd found the butter and jam, set out 2 mugs, and was moving with the quiet efficiency of someone trying not to be a burden. "Good morning," Archer said from the doorway. She startled, nearly dropping the toast. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go through your things. I just thought, after everything you did yesterday, the least I could do was make breakfast." "It's fine." He moved into the kitchen, touched by the gesture. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to." She poured coffee with hands that were steadier than last night. "I'm not used to people helping me without expecting something back. This feels better, more even." They sat at the kitchen table as pale winter light filtered through the windows. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Everything looked clean and new, untouched. Archer watched Iris eat more slowly today, with less desperation. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes seemed clearer. She'd pulled her dark hair back in a ponytail, revealing a face that was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 22, 23 at most. "Tell me about your mother," he said, surprising himself with the question. Iris looked up from her toast. "Why?" "Just curious. You said her name was Dinah." "Yeah, Dinah Ashworth." She smiled softly at the memory. "She was a teacher. Elementary school. 3rd grade. She loved her students more than anything." The smile faded. "Until I came along, I guess." "What do you mean?" "I was raised in foster care." Iris set down her coffee mug carefully. "My mom gave me up when I was born. I didn't meet her until I was 17. Tracked her down through the adoption agency. We had about a year together before the cancer took her." Archer's mind snagged on the name. Dinah Ashworth. His late wife had been Dinah, though her maiden name was something else. He was sure of it. But it had been so long since he'd thought about those early years, and grief had a way of blurring memories. "She must have had her reasons," Archer said carefully. "She did. She was young, scared, alone, no family support." Iris traced the rim of her mug. "She told me she'd been in love once, during college, but they broke up, found out she was pregnant after. By the time she knew, he'd moved on with his life, and she couldn't bring herself to tell him." Something cold settled in Archer's stomach. "College where?" "University in Missoula. She worked in the admin office." Iris glanced at him. "Why?" "No reason. Just, I went to school there long time ago." He forced himself to take a sip of coffee, though it tasted like ash. Small world. Yeah. She didn't seem to notice his discomfort. "She said giving me up was the hardest thing she ever did, but she was barely 20 and had no money, no degree, no way to take care of a baby. She thought she was doing the right thing. Did you forgive her?" "Eventually." Iris touched her belly absently. "I understand it better now. Being pregnant, knowing you're responsible for this life. It's terrifying. And when you have nothing, when you're completely alone, the choices get impossible." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, a neighbor was shoveling their driveway, the scrape of metal on concrete, rhythmic and ordinary. "What about the baby's father?" Archer asked. "Does he know where you are?" "He doesn't care where I am." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Brendan wanted me to get an abortion, said he wasn't ready to be a father, that a baby would ruin everything we'd built. When I said no, he told me to leave. Just like that. 3 years together, gone. I'm sorry." "I'm not." She met his eyes with unexpected strength. "If he couldn't love our child, I don't want him in our lives. We'll be better off without him." The conviction in her voice reminded Archer of his own daughter. His Iris had that same fierce independence, that same refusal to compromise her values. The similarity made his chest ache. "You'll be a good mother," he said. "I hope so." Vulnerability flickered across her face. "I'm scared I'll mess it up. I never had a real family, just foster homes that ranged from neglectful to actively bad. I don't know how to do this. Nobody knows how to do it until they do it." Archer thought of holding his newborn daughter for the first time, the terror and wonder of that tiny life in his arms. You just love them, protect them, try your best. That's all any parent can do. Iris's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you for saying that." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Archer answered to hear his brother's concerned voice. "You're alive," Cyrus said. "I was starting to worry." "Storm wasn't that bad," says the man who lives alone and never calls back. Cyrus paused. "You doing okay today? I know Christmas is hard. I'm managing." Archer glanced at Iris, who was pretending not to listen. "Actually, I have company." Company?" Cyrus's surprise was evident. "Who please tell me you finally accepted Beatrice's dinner invitation?" "Not exactly, it's a long story." Archer turned slightly away, lowering his voice. "A young woman needed help last night. She's staying here until we can get her where she needs to go." A young woman. Cyrus's tone shifted to something between concern and curiosity. "Archer, what's going on?" "Nothing inappropriate, if that's what you're thinking. She was stranded in the storm, pregnant, with nowhere to go. I couldn't just leave her out there." "Of course not." Cyrus softened. That's good of you, but be careful, okay? You don't know anything about her." "I know enough." Archer watched Iris carry dishes to the sink, moving carefully with her pregnant belly. "She needed help. I had a warm house and food. It's Christmas. You're a good man, little brother." Cyrus hesitated. "Listen, offer still stands for dinner tomorrow, both of you. The kids would love to see you, and Maria's making enough food to feed half of Billings." "I'll think about it." "That means no." "That means I'll think about it." After he hung up, Archer found Iris washing dishes at the sink. "You don't have to do that." "I know." She didn't stop. "But I want to feel useful. You've already done so much." He dried as she washed, falling into an easy rhythm. Through the window above the sink, he could see his backyard buried under snow, the bird feeder he'd built with his daughter barely visible. "That's a beautiful quilt," Iris said, nodding, toward the living room, where Dinah's handiwork draped over the couch. "My wife made it before she died." "You've lost a lot," Iris said quietly. "Yeah, the simple acknowledgement hurt less than sympathy would have. But you keep going. That's what they'd want. That's what my mum said too, in the hospital near the end. She told me not to let grief stop me from living." Iris set down the last dish, hard advice to follow. The hardest. They moved to the living room, where Archer built a fire in the fireplace, while Iris settled on the couch with Dinah's quilt pulled over her legs. The domesticity of it felt strange and right at the same time. This house that had been so empty suddenly occupied, lived in again. "Can I ask you something?" Iris's voice was hesitant. "Sure. Why did you help me? Really? Most people would have just driven past." Archer poked at the fire, watching flames catch and grow. Why had he stopped? He could have kept driving, could have told himself someone else would help her, could have chosen the easier path of willful ignorance. "My daughter," he said finally. "When she died, I kept thinking about all the times I could have done more, been there more. All the chances I missed." He turned to face Iris. "When I saw you standing there in the snow, I thought, what if someone had needed to help her and they didn't? What if she'd been the one alone and scared and everyone just drove past? So you helped me for your daughter." "I helped you because it was the right thing to do. But yeah, she's part of it." He sat in the chair across from her. "I like to think she'd be proud of that choice." "I think she would be." Iris smiled, a real smile that transformed her tired face. "I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you." They spent the afternoon in companionable silence, Iris reading a book she'd found on the shelf, Archer watching an old movie with the sound low. Outside, neighbors emerged to shovel, and kids built snowmen, the world slowly returning to normal after the storm. But inside this house, on this Christmas day, nothing felt normal at all. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, like the moment before a revelation that would change everything. Archer just didn't know it yet. The next morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the sky a brilliant blue that made the snow-covered landscape almost painful to look at. Archer woke to find Iris already in the kitchen again, this time attempting pancakes with ingredients she'd found in his poorly stocked cupboards. "I'm starting to think you don't sleep," he said, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. Baby keeps me awake. She rubbed her lower back with a grimace. Plus, I'm not used to sleeping somewhere safe. Take some adjustment. The casual mention of her usual lack of safety made Archer's protective instincts flare again, but he kept his tone light. Well, you're safe here. For as long as you need. They ate breakfast while pale sunlight streamed through the windows, turning everything golden. The pancakes were slightly burnt around the edges, but tasted better than anything Archer had eaten in months, probably because he hadn't made them himself in solitary silence. The roads should be clear enough today, Iris said, though she didn't sound happy about it. I should probably figure out how to get to Idaho. Bus station won't be open until tomorrow at the earliest. Holiday schedules. Archer poured more coffee. Besides, you shouldn't travel until you've rested properly. Another day or two won't hurt. I don't want to impose. You're not. He met her eyes. Honestly, it's been nice. Having someone here. The house has been too quiet for too long. She nodded slowly, and he could see the relief in her face. Whatever independence she was trying to maintain, she was exhausted and overwhelmed, and accepting help was clearly difficult for her. After breakfast, Iris excused herself to rest, and Archer found himself alone with thoughts that had been circling since yesterday. Dinah Ashworth, University in Missoula, a baby given up for adoption 23 years ago. His own wife, Dinah, had gone to that same university. They'd met there during his junior year, started dating, fallen in love with the intensity that only young people can manage. But there had been a rough patch. 6 months during his senior year when they'd broken up over something he could barely remember now. She'd been distant, distracted, and he'd been too proud to ask why. They'd gone their separate ways for half a year before reconnecting and eventually marrying. But during that separation, Dinah had disappeared for a semester. Transferred to a different school temporarily, she'd said. Family issues. He'd never pressed for details, and she'd never offered them. Could it be possible? Archer climbed the stairs to the bedroom he'd once shared with his wife, his heart pounding uncomfortably. In the closet, pushed far back behind his hanging clothes, were boxes of Dinah's things he hadn't been able to sort through after she died. Letters, photographs, documents, the accumulated evidence of a life. He pulled out the box labeled college and sat on the floor, hands shaking slightly as he opened it. Yearbooks from University of Missoula, programs from campus events, photographs of a younger Dinah with friends whose names he'd forgotten. He flipped through carefully, looking for, what? Proof of something he desperately hoped wasn't true. Then he found the letters. A small bundle tied with a faded ribbon, addressed to Dinah at an address he didn't recognize. He untied the ribbon with careful fingers and opened the first envelope. The letter inside was dated March 1982, right in the middle of their separation. Dear Dinah, it began, in handwriting he didn't recognize. I hope this finds you well. The counselor at the agency said you wanted to receive updates, so I'm writing to tell you that your daughter was placed with a loving family. She's healthy and beautiful, and they're so grateful to have her. Archer's hands went numb. He read the words again, then again, unable to process what they meant. Your daughter. Dinah had a daughter. Had given her up for adoption. During their breakup, she'd been pregnant and never told him. The next letter was dated 6 months later. Your daughter is thriving. The family sends their thanks and promises to give her every opportunity. Another letter a year after that was the last. This will be my final update as per your request. Your daughter is doing wonderfully. She's walking now and saying her first words. I hope knowing she's happy brings you some peace. Archer sat on the floor, surrounded by old papers and the ruins of everything he thought he knew about his marriage. Dinah had carried this secret for over 30 years, had gotten pregnant during their separation, given the baby up and never said a word. Not when they got back together, not when they married, not even when they had Iris together years later. Why? Had she not known he was the father? Had she been afraid he'd reject her? Or had there been someone else entirely? The thoughts made him dizzy. He carefully gathered the letters and carried them downstairs, his mind racing. He needed to know more, but confronting Iris felt wrong somehow. If she was Dinah's daughter, she'd already lived a lifetime of rejection and abandonment. He couldn't add to that burden without being certain. In his office, he found the file where he'd kept important documents. Birth certificates, marriage license, Dinah's death certificate. He pulled out her birth certificate and stared at it. Dinah Marie Ashworth, born 1960 in Butte, Montana. Ashworth, the same last name Iris had mentioned. His vision blurred at the edges. This couldn't be coincidence. A young woman named Iris, his daughter's name, whose mother was named Dinah Ashworth, who'd given her up for adoption after getting pregnant at University of Missoula during the exact time frame when his own Dinah had disappeared. The universe wasn't that cruel, was it? Archer heard movement upstairs, Iris waking from her nap. He quickly put the documents away and tried to compose himself, but his hands still shook and his heart raced like he'd run a marathon. When Iris came downstairs 20 minutes later, he was sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee, staring at nothing. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Fine, just thinking." He forced himself to look at her, really look at her. Dark hair like Dinah's, eyes that were almost the same shade. The shape of her face, her hands, the way she tilted her head when listening, were those familiarities real, or was he seeing what he wanted to see? About what? "Your mother. You said her name was Dinah Ashworth?" "Yeah." Iris sat down across from him, wary now. "Why?" "My wife, my late wife, her maiden name was Ashworth. Dinah Ashworth." The words hung in the air between them like a held breath. Iris's face went pale. That's impossible." "It's just a coincidence, is it?" Archer pulled out his phone, found a photo of Dinah from when she was younger. "Is this your mother?" Iris looked at the screen, and he watched the color drain completely from her face. Her hand went to her mouth, and tears spilled over without warning. "That's her," she whispered. "That's my mom." Why do you have her picture?" "Because she was my wife." Archer's voice came out rough with emotion. "Dinah and I were married for 28 years. She died 4 years ago." "No." Iris shook her head violently. "No, that can't be right." "She never mentioned. She said the father moved on, that she lost touch with him. We broke up for 6 months during college. She disappeared for a semester. I never knew why." Archer reached across the table, took her hand in his. "When's your birthday?" "April 15th, 1982. He did the math quickly. Conception would have been around July 1981, right in the middle of their separation. 9 months later, Dinah would have given birth and given the baby up for adoption, then returned to school and eventually reconnected with him. "Oh God," Iris breathed, seeing the same realization on his face. "You think you're my—" "I don't know, maybe." Archer squeezed her hand. "But if your mother was my Dinah, then the daughter you lost was my half-sister." Tears were streaming down Iris's face now. "And you might be your father." The word hung between them, impossible and overwhelming. They sat there holding hands across the kitchen table, two broken people who'd found each other by accident on a Christmas Eve, now facing a truth that seemed too enormous to be real. "I need to see proof," Iris said finally. "I need to know for sure. I have letters from the adoption agency to Dinah, and your adoption papers. Do you have those?" She nodded mutely. "Get them. We'll compare the case numbers. If they match, then everything changes." Archer thought of his daughter, his Iris, who died without ever knowing she had a sister. Thought of Dinah carrying this secret until her grave. Thought of this young woman in front of him who might be his own flesh and blood. "Yeah," he said softly. "Everything changes." Iris went upstairs with trembling legs and returned clutching a worn manila envelope. Her face was blotchy from crying, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the papers. Archer cleared space on the kitchen table, his own hands no steadier. "I've carried these with me for 5 years, she said, spreading the documents out. "Since my mom died and I went through her things. She'd kept them hidden in a safety deposit box." Archer retrieved the letters from his office, along with Dinah's college records he'd found. They laid everything out like evidence at a crime scene. Documents that would either confirm or destroy the impossible theory forming between them. The adoption papers showed a baby girl born April 15th, 1982, at St. Vincent Hospital in Billings. Mother's name, Dinah Marie Ashworth, age 21. Father's name, unknown, unknown. Dinah had never told them about him. "Here," Archer said, his throat tight. He pushed forward the letter from the adoption agency. Case number A773482. Iris found her corresponding document, ran her finger down to the reference number. The 73482. Her voice broke on the last digit. "It matches." They stared at each other across the table, the reality of it crashing over them like a wave. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. Dinah Ashworth, Archer's wife, had given birth to this young woman and given her up for adoption without ever telling him. "She never said anything," Archer whispered. "In 30 years of marriage, she never once mentioned you." Maybe she didn't know how. Iris's tears dripped onto the old papers. Or maybe she was afraid you'd hate her for it. "I could never hate her." But even as he said it, anger flickered beneath the grief. How could Dinah have kept something this enormous secret? How could she have let him live his whole life not knowing he had another daughter? Iris's voice was small. "Was I yours? Or was there someone else?" The question hung heavy between them. Archer pulled out his phone again, found the photo of his daughter, his other daughter, and set it beside a picture of young Dinah. Then he looked at Iris, really studied her features in the kitchen light. The resemblance was there. Not obvious, but present. The shape of her jaw, the way her eyebrows arched, the angle of her cheekbones. She had Dinah's coloring and his daughter's smile. She had something of his own mother in the line of her nose. "I think you were mine," he said quietly. "I think we broke up and she got pregnant, and by the time she knew, too much time had passed. She was scared and alone, and she made the choice she thought she had to make. And then you got back together, a year later. We were married within 2 years. And Iris, our Iris, 3 years after that." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "All that time you were out there somewhere? My daughter, and I never knew." Iris was crying openly now, harsh sobs that shook her whole body. "I spent my whole childhood wondering why I wasn't good enough to keep. Went through 6 different foster homes before I aged out of the system. And all along I had a father who would have loved you." Archer moved around the table and pulled her into his arms. This stranger, who was becoming something else entirely. "If I'd known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." She clung to him, and he held her, while she cried for all the lost years, all the missed moments, all the pain that might have been avoided if Dinah had just been brave enough to tell the truth. When the storm of emotion finally passed, they sat together at the table, exhausted and raw. Outside, life continued normally. Cars driving past, neighbors shoveling snow, the ordinary rhythms of a day after Christmas. But inside this kitchen, everything had fundamentally shifted. "What do we do now?" Iris asked, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her borrowed shirt. "I don't know." Archer stared at the document spread before them. "We could get a DNA test. Be absolutely certain. Do you need one?" He thought about it, did he? The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The timing matched. The names matched. The case number matched. And beyond the paperwork, there was something deeper, a recognition he'd felt from the moment he'd seen her in the snow. His daughter's name on a stranger's lips. The way she moved, spoke, carried herself. "No," he said finally. "I don't need one. I believe you're mine." Fresh tears spilled down Iris's cheeks. "I've never had anyone say that before. That I was theirs. Well, you do now." He took her hand again, squeezed gently. "If you want me, that is. I know this is overwhelming. I'm a stranger to you, and finding out your mother had this whole other life. I want you." The words came out fierce and certain. "I've wanted a father my entire life. I used to make up stories about him, that he was a soldier overseas, or a scientist on a research station, or that he didn't know I existed and was looking for me. And now," her voice caught, "now it turns out the last one was true. I was looking," Archer said, though he hadn't known it until this moment. "I just didn't know what I was looking for." They sat in silence for a while, processing everything. Archer's mind kept circling back to his other daughter, the one buried on the hill. She died without ever knowing she had a sister. That loss felt even more profound now, not just his grief, but the grief of what might have been. Two sisters who could have known each other, loved each other, been there for each other. "Tell me about her," Iris said softly, as if reading his thoughts. "About my sister. She was—" Archer's voice broke, but he pushed through. "She was the best thing I ever did. Bright and funny and stubborn as hell. She wanted to be a teacher like her mother. Got her degree, started working at the elementary school here in town. The kids loved her. She sounds wonderful. She would have loved having a sister. She used to beg us for siblings when she was little." He smiled through tears. "Dinah always said one was plenty. I wonder now if she was thinking of you. If it hurt too much to imagine having another child when she'd given one away. I wish I could have met her. Both of them. Me too." Archer stood, went to the mantel where family photos stood in neat rows. He brought back a framed picture of his daughter at her college graduation. Cap and gown, brilliant smile, the whole world ahead of her. "This is Iris, your sister." The young woman in his kitchen took the photo with reverent hands, studying the face of the sibling she'd never known. "We have the same eyes," she whispered. "And look, the same smile." It was true. The resemblance was there, undeniable now that they knew to look for it. Two daughters, one lost to adoption and one lost to death, and Archer caught between them with a heart that didn't know whether to break or heal. "She would have wanted you to have something of hers," he said impulsively. "When you're ready, you should go through her things. Take whatever feels right. I couldn't, please. Your sisters, family, what's hers is yours now." He gestured to the house around them. "All of this is yours too if you want it. A home, a father, a place to raise your baby. I know it's fast, I know it's overwhelming, but yes." Iris didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want that. I want all of it." They held each other again. Two people who'd been strangers 3 days ago, now bound by blood and loss and the strange mercy of a Christmas Eve snowstorm. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, a family was being rebuilt from broken pieces. "We'll figure it out," Archer promised. "Together." "Together," Iris echoed, and for the first time in her life, the word felt real. The days that followed took on a strange, dreamlike quality. Archer called Cyrus and explained everything, the discovery, the documents, the impossible reunion. His brother was stunned into rare silence, then bombarded them with questions that neither Archer nor Iris could fully answer. How had Dinah kept this secret? Why had she never said anything? What did it mean for all of them now? "It means I have a niece I never knew about," Cyrus said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "And a great niece or great nephew on the way. When can I meet her?" They drove to Billings 3 days later, Archer's truck navigating the winter roads carefully. Iris sat beside him, nervous energy radiating from her as she fidgeted with the hem of her borrowed coat, another piece from his late daughter's closet. "What if they don't like me?" she asked for the 3rd time.
"They'll love you," Archer assured her.
Cyrus has been waiting his whole life to have more family to fuss over. Cyrus lived in a comfortable ranch house on the outskirts of Billings with his wife Maria and their 2 adult children, who'd come home for the holidays. When Archer pulled into the driveway, the entire family spilled out onto the porch despite the cold, eager and anxious to meet this unexpected relative. Maria reached Iris first, pulling her into a warm embrace before the girl even had a chance to introduce herself. "Welcome to the family," she said simply, and Iris burst into tears right there on the front walk. Inside, over coffee and Maria's famous cinnamon rolls, they told the story again. Cyrus studied Iris with the same intensity Archer had, looking for family resemblances, traces of the sister-in-law he'd loved. His children, Archer's nephew and niece, were fascinated and welcoming, already making plans to help set up a nursery and offering hand-me-down baby clothes. "Mom would have wanted you here," Cyrus said to Iris during a quiet moment. "I wish she'd trusted us enough to tell us, but I understand why she was scared. Single motherhood in 1982, no support system, no money. It must have felt impossible." "She did the best she could," Iris said, and Archer heard forgiveness in her voice that he himself was still struggling to feel. On the drive back to Frost Hollow, Iris was quiet but peaceful. "I've never had family like that," she said eventually. People who just accepted me. No questions, no conditions. That's what family is supposed to be, Archer replied, though he was thinking about Dinah, about the family they could have had if she'd just been honest. Back home, they fell into a routine that felt both foreign and natural. Iris continued making breakfast each morning, insisting on contributing however she could. Archer taught her about the hardware store, and she surprised him by being genuinely interested in the business. They spent evenings talking, filling in the gaps of 23 lost years. She told him about foster care, about the families that had failed her in various ways, about her mother, Dinah's final year, how they'd reconnected too late but had tried to make the most of the time they had, about her dreams for her baby, her fears about motherhood, her determination to break the cycle of abandonment. He told her about his marriage, the good years before cancer took Dinah, about raising his daughter, watching her grow into a remarkable woman, about the accident that had stolen her away, the grief that had hollowed him out until he was barely living. "You saved me too," he said one night as they sat by the fire. "I didn't realize how lost I was until I had a reason to find my way back." "We saved each other," Iris corrected gently. A week after their trip to Billings, Beatrice showed up at Archer's door with a casserole and questions. Word had spread through Frost Hollow's efficient gossip network. Archer had a long-lost daughter who was pregnant and living with him. The story had gotten embellished in the telling, but the core truth remained. "I had to see for myself," Beatrice said, bustling into the kitchen where Iris was making tea. She stopped short, studying the young woman with the practiced eye of someone who'd known the Pembroke family for decades. "Well, I'll be damned. You look just like Dinah did at your age." "You knew my mother?" Iris asked eagerly. "Knew her well. She worked at the elementary school with my sister." Beatrice set down the casserole and pulled Iris into a hug. "She was a good woman with a kind heart. I'm sorry you didn't get more time with her." Over tea, Beatrice shared stories of Dinah that Archer had never heard. Small moments from the years before they met. Glimpses of the woman his wife had been before she became his. Iris absorbed every word hungrily, building a fuller picture of the mother she'd barely known. "She volunteered at the food bank every Thursday," Beatrice said. "Never missed a week. That everyone deserves to be fed and cared for, no exceptions." She looked at Iris meaningfully. "She would be proud of you for keeping your baby." That took courage. After Beatrice left, Iris was quiet for a long time. "I keep thinking about her," she said finally. "About the guilt she must have carried. Giving me up, then having another daughter, living with that secret every day." "She had her reasons," Archer said, though the words still tasted bitter. "I know, and I forgive her, I do. But I wish she'd told you. We could have had so much more time. We have time now. That's what matters." But even as he said it, Archer felt the weight of lost years pressing down. 23 Christmases, birthdays, first days of school. Graduations, all the moments that should have been shared but weren't. His daughter had grown up alone, shuffled through foster care, while he'd been here building a life with a family that was incomplete in ways he hadn't known. That night, unable to sleep, Archer went to his daughter's room. He hadn't spent much time in here since Iris, his new daughter, had started staying in the guest room instead. The space felt like a shrine, preserved exactly as it had been the day she died. He sat on the bed and pulled out her journal from the nightstand. He'd never read it before. It felt like a violation of her privacy. But now, desperate to feel close to her, to somehow tell her about her sister, he opened to a random page. The entry was dated 2 months before she died. "I had the strangest dream last night," his daughter had written. "I dreamed I had a sister, older than me, dark-haired like Mom. We were sitting in the kitchen at home, drinking coffee and laughing. It felt so real that when I woke up, I was sad she wasn't there. I've never wanted a sibling before, but something about this dream made me feel like I was missing someone I'd never met." Crazy, right? Archer's hands trembled as he read the words again. His daughter had dreamed of her sister just weeks before dying. Some part of her had known, had sensed the incomplete nature of their family. He closed the journal carefully and stood, looking around the room that held so many memories. Tomorrow, he decided, he would tell Iris about this entry. He would give her this journal so she could know her sister through her own words. And together, they would find a way to honor both the daughter he'd lost and the daughter he'd found. Outside, snow began falling again, softer this time, gentler. Through the window, he could see frost hollows settling in for another winter night. Lights glowed in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued as it always did. And in this house, a family was learning how to be whole again. 2 weeks into January, Iris woke Archer in the middle of the night, her voice tight with pain. "Something's wrong. The baby's moving differently, and I'm having contractions, real ones this time." They were at the hospital within 20 minutes. Dr. Beverly Frost examining Iris with practiced efficiency, while Archer paced the waiting room like a caged animal. When the doctor finally emerged, her expression was serious but calm. "The baby's fine, but Iris is showing signs of preeclampsia. Her blood pressure is dangerously high. We need to keep her here for observation, possibly induce labor early if it doesn't stabilize." "How early?" Archer asked, his heart hammering.
"She's 37 weeks now."
"That's technically full term, but we'd rather wait another week or two if possible." Dr. Frost put a reassuring hand on his arm. "We're monitoring her closely. Try not to worry. Easy to say, impossible to do." Archer spent the next 3 days barely leaving Iris's hospital room, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair by her bed, bringing her books and magazines to pass the endless hours of bed rest. She bore it with remarkable patience, though he could see the fear beneath her calm exterior. "What if something happens to me?" she asked on the 3rd night, her hand resting on her belly. "What happens to the baby?" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Archer said firmly. "But if it does, promise me you'll take care of her. Promise me she won't end up in the system like I did." "I promise." He took her hand, squeezed it. "But you're going to be fine. You're both going to be fine." On the 4th day, while Iris slept and Archer dozed in his chair, a nurse came in with a clipboard and a puzzled expression. "Mr. Pembroke, I need you to fill out some additional paperwork. There's been a question about the medical history forms." Archer followed her to the nurse's station, still groggy from interrupted sleep. She handed him several sheets, pointing to a section highlighted in yellow. "We need complete family medical history for both parents," she explained. Iris listed her mother's information, but there's nothing for the father. "Since you're here as her support person, I thought maybe you could help fill in the gaps." "I'm not just her support person," Archer said. "I'm her father." The nurse's eyebrows rose. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. The intake forms listed you as family friend. Let me update that." She made a note, then looked up. "Do you know your medical history? Any genetic conditions we should be aware of?" Archer rattled off what he knew: his father's heart condition, his mother's diabetes, his own clean bill of health. The nurse wrote it all down, then paused. "And the baby's father? Do we have any information on his medical history?" "No, he's not in the picture." "That's fine. We'd just like to be as thorough as possible." She smiled kindly. "You can go back to your daughter now. We'll keep monitoring her closely." Archer returned to find Iris awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I need to tell you something," she said before he could even sit down. "Something I've been putting off because I was afraid." His stomach dropped. "What is it?" "When I found my mother, when I was 17, we spent a lot of time going through her old things. She gave me boxes of memories, told me stories about her life." Iris sat up straighter, wincing at the effort. "There was a letter in one of those boxes, sealed. She made me promise not to open it unless you ever asked about her past." Archer's mouth went dry. "What?" "She said if you ever questioned things, if you ever seemed like you were wondering about something she'd kept hidden, I should make sure you got this letter." Iris reached for her bag on the nightstand, pulled out a worn envelope. "I didn't understand what she meant then. But now you think this is about you, about her giving you up." "I know it is." She held out the envelope with shaking hands. "I think she knew someday the truth would come out. I think she wanted you to hear it from her." Archer took the envelope, as if it might burn him. His name was written on the front in Dinah's familiar handwriting, neat, precise, the letters slightly slanted to the right. The seal was still intact, the paper yellowed with age. "I can't read this here," he said, his voice rough. I need a minute." He walked out of the hospital room on unsteady legs, found a quiet corner of the waiting area, and sat down with the letter clutched in his hands. For a long moment he just stared at it, afraid of what it might contain. Then with trembling fingers he broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. "My dearest Archer," it began, and tears blurred his vision immediately. "If you're reading this, then you know. Somehow you've discovered the secret I've carried for our entire marriage, and I can only imagine what you must think of me. Let me start by saying I'm sorry, sorrier than words can express, for every lie of omission, every hidden truth, every day I let pass without telling you about our daughter. Yes, our daughter. Not someone else's child, but yours and mine, conceived during those 6 months we were apart. I knew I was pregnant a month after we broke up, and I was terrified. We weren't speaking. You'd already started dating someone else, and I couldn't bear the thought of you thinking I was trying to trap you or manipulate you back into a relationship. So I left, went to stay with a distant aunt in Wyoming, had the baby there and gave her up for adoption. Her name was Iris. I named her after your grandmother, the one you always spoke about with such love. I thought if I couldn't keep her, at least she could carry a piece of both of us into whatever life she found. The adoption counselor promised she'd go to a good family. I made them swear she'd be loved and cared for. Then I signed the papers and left the hospital with empty arms and a broken heart that never fully healed. When you and I reconnected a year later, I wanted to tell you. I started to, 100 times, but the words would never come. How do you tell someone you love that you gave away their child? How do you admit that kind of loss? I was a coward, Archer. I chose my own comfort over your right to know. Then we got married, and the secret felt even more dangerous. We were building a life together. How could I drop this bomb and risk destroying it? When we had Iris, our second Iris, I held her in my arms and thought about the first one, wondered where she was, if she was happy, if she ever thought about the mother who gave her away. I lived with the guilt every single day. It poisoned some of the joy I should have felt, turned some of the happiness bitter. But I was too afraid, to be honest, too afraid of losing you. If you found her, if our first daughter has somehow come back into your life, please don't blame her for my choices. Love her the way I should have been brave enough to let you love her from the beginning. Be the father to her that I prevented you from being. And if you can find it in your heart, forgive me. I never stopped loving you, and I never stopped regretting the choice I made. Our daughter, both our daughters, deserved better than the fear that ruled my life. All my love. Always. Dinah. Archer sat in the hospital waiting room with tears streaming down his face, the letter trembling in his hands. Around him, life continued. Nurses hurrying past, visitors coming and going, the intercom calling doctors to various stations. But he was frozen in this moment, reading his dead wife's confession, understanding for the first time the weight she'd carried. She'd known. All those years, she'd known he was Iris's father. She'd named their second daughter after the first one she'd given away, carrying both grief and love in that choice. She'd lived with the secret like a stone around her neck, too afraid to speak the truth. He thought about all the times he'd seen sadness in her eyes and attributed it to stress or fatigue. All the moments she'd held their daughter a little too tightly, loved her a little too fiercely. She'd been loving 2 daughters at once, the one in her arms and the one she'd lost.
Are you okay?
A nurse paused beside him, concern on her face. "No," Archer said honestly. "But I will be." He folded the letter carefully and went back to Iris's room. She looked up anxiously when he entered, searching his face for his reaction. "She knew," he said simply. "She knew you were mine. She named you Iris, and then she named our second daughter Iris too. Both of you were hers. Both of you were loved, even if she couldn't show it the way she wanted to." Fresh tears rolled down Iris's cheeks. "I wish I'd known her longer. I wish I could have told her I understood. She knew you would." Archer sat beside the bed, took her hand. "She left this letter with you because she trusted you to find me if the time came. She was preparing for this moment, hoping for it, even if she was too afraid to make it happen herself. Do you forgive her? Archer thought about it, really thought about it. The anger was still there, the grief over lost time, the frustration at Dinah's fear. But beneath it all was love and understanding and the recognition that she'd been young and scared and doing the best she could with impossible choices.
Yeah, he said finally.
I forgive her, and I think she sent you to me. On that Christmas Eve, in that storm, I think somehow she was watching and knew it was time. Iris smiled through her tears. I like to think that too. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, two people bound by blood and loss and love, holding the letter that finally told the whole truth. Outside, night had fallen over Frost Hollow, and somewhere in the darkness, Archer imagined Dinah watching over them both, finally at peace now that her secret was revealed, and her family, fractured for so long, was whole again. Iris's condition stabilized over the next few days, her blood pressure gradually returning to safer levels under careful monitoring. Dr. Frost remained cautiously optimistic, but insisted on keeping her hospitalized until delivery. The baby was healthy and active, measuring well, showing no signs of distress despite the complications. Archer barely left the hospital. He brought fresh clothes for Iris, books from home, and the journal his other daughter had kept. When Iris read the entry about dreaming of a sister, she cried for an hour, not tears of sadness, but of wonder at the connection that had existed between them even before they knew each other. She felt me, Iris whispered, clutching the journal. Somehow she knew I existed. I think she did, Archer agreed. I think part of her was always searching for the missing piece of our family. Cyrus visited twice, bringing Maria's cooking and practical advice about preparing for a newborn. Beatrice stopped by with half the diner's menu, insisting that hospital food was no way to nourish a pregnant woman. Even townspeople Archer barely knew sent cards and small gifts, welcoming Iris into the Pembroke family with the casual kindness of a small community. One afternoon, while Iris napped, Archer found himself in the hospital chapel, a small, quiet room with simple wooden pews and a stained glass window depicting a sunrise. He wasn't particularly religious, hadn't been to church regularly since Dinah's funeral, but he needed somewhere to think. He thought about his daughter, buried on the hill overlooking town, about Dinah, who'd carried such a heavy secret for so long, about this new daughter who'd appeared in his life like an answered prayer he hadn't known to offer, about the grandchild, who would arrive soon, continuing the family line he'd thought ended with his daughter's death. I don't know if you're listening, he said quietly to whoever might be listening, but if you are, thank you for bringing her to me, for giving me another chance at this. He thought about the hardware store, about the modifications he'd need to make to the house for a baby, about teaching Iris the business so she could work there when she was ready, about birthday parties and school plays and all the ordinary moments that make up a life. He'd thought those days were behind him, but now they stretched ahead again, full of possibility. When he returned to Iris's room, she was awake and talking to Dr. Frost. We're going to induce labor tomorrow morning, the doctor was saying. Your blood pressure is stable and the baby's ready. No point in risking complications by waiting longer. Iris's face went pale. Tomorrow, you'll do fine. Dr. Frost smiled reassuringly. We'll start slow. Let your body do most of the work, and you'll have your father here the whole time. After the doctor left, Iris turned to Archer with wide, frightened eyes. I'm not ready. What if I can't do this? What if I'm a terrible mother? You won't be. Archer sat on the edge of the bed, took both her hands in his. You're going to be amazing because you know what it's like to need someone and have them not be there. You'll never let your child feel that way. What if something goes wrong? What if, then we'll handle it. Together. He squeezed her hands gently. You're not alone anymore, Iris. You have me, you have Cyrus and Maria. You have this whole town that's already half in love with you. We're all here, and we're not going anywhere. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and he held her while she cried out her fear and anxiety. When she finally calmed, he helped her wash her face and brought her the baby blanket he'd found. In the attic, the one Dinah had knitted years ago, soft yellow yarn with tiny white flowers along the border. "Your mother made this," he said, spreading it over Iris's lap. "She made it when we were trying for our second child, after the first Iris was born. We never had another baby, so it's been sitting in a box all these years. I think she'd want your daughter to have it." Iris ran her fingers over the careful stitches, the labor of love evident in every row. "It's beautiful." She was good with her hands, patient. She'd spend hours on projects like this. Archer's voice grew thick with emotion. "I wish she could be here tomorrow. She'd be so proud of you. I wish I could have known her better, really known her, not just that 1 year at the end. You know her through me now, through our daughter's journal, through this blanket, through the family we're building." He touched the soft yarn gently. "She's here in all the ways that matter." That evening, they made plans. Archer would go home to shower and change, get a few hours of real sleep, and return by 6 in the morning before the induction began. Cyrus and Maria would come once labor was progressing. Beatrice wanted to be called as soon as the baby arrived. "Have you thought about names?" Archer asked. "I was thinking—" Iris hesitated, then continued. "I was thinking Dinah, for my mother, but I don't know if that's—" "She'd love that." Archer's eyes burned with tears. "What about a middle name?" "I thought maybe Catherine, after my sister." Archer couldn't speak for a moment, overcome by the gesture. His daughter, both his daughters now, would live on in this new life. The family circle, broken for so long, was coming together in unexpected ways. "Dinah, Catherine," he said finally. "It's perfect." Before he left that night, he kissed Iris's forehead, the first time he'd done such a fatherly gesture, and it felt as natural as breathing. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a big day." "I'm glad you found me," she said softly. "Or I found you, however it happened." "Me too, daughter. Me too." The drive home through the dark winter night gave him time to think about everything that had changed since Christmas Eve. A month ago, he'd been a hollow man, going through the motions of living, marking time until death would reunite him with the family he'd lost. Now, he had a daughter again, a grandchild on the way, a reason to wake up each morning and face the day. At home, he walked through the quiet rooms and saw them differently now. The guest room would become a nursery. The kitchen would see family dinners again. The living room would echo with a baby's cries and eventually a child's laughter. The house that had been a tomb was becoming a home again. He went to his bedroom and opened Dinah's jewelry box, pulled out her wedding ring and the locket she'd worn every day. Tomorrow he'd give them to Iris. Family heirlooms passed from mother to daughter, as they should have been all along. In his own daughter's room, he stood for a long moment, looking at the space that had been preserved like a shrine. It was time, he realized, to let it change. Not to erase her memory, but to make room for the future. Her sister should feel welcome. Here, should be able to take the things that mattered and make them part of her own life. He pulled out a box and began carefully packing items he thought Iris might want. Photo albums, favorite books, small keepsakes that told the story of a life cut too short. His daughter would have wanted her sister to have these things, would have delighted in sharing her world. By midnight, he was finally in bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about tomorrow. In a few hours, he'd become a grandfather. He'd watch his newly found daughter become a mother. He'd hold his grandchild and see the future of his family secured in a way he'd never imagined possible. Sleep came eventually, and with it dreams of Dinah and his daughter standing together, smiling, giving their blessing to what was about to unfold. When he woke before dawn, he felt more rested than he had in months, ready for whatever the day would bring. He showered, dressed, and was at the hospital by 5:30, finding Iris already awake and nervous. "Ready?" he asked, taking her hand. "No," she admitted, "but let's do this anyway." Together, they waited for the medical team to arrive and begin the process that would bring new life into the world and complete the circle of a family that had been broken but was finally, blessedly, becoming whole again. The induction began at 7 in the morning with clinical efficiency. Nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines, speaking in calm tones that did little to ease Iris's anxiety. Archer stayed close, holding her hand through the initial contractions that were more uncomfortable than painful. "This is nothing," the nurse assured them. "Just your body warming up. The real work comes later." By noon, the contractions had intensified. Iris gripped Archer's hand so hard he lost feeling in his fingers, but he didn't complain. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, offered ice chips, and murmured encouragement when the pain made her cry out. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "It's too much." "You can. You are doing it." He brushed damp hair from her face. "You're the strongest person I know. You barely know me." "I know enough." Dr. Frost came in at 2 o'clock to check her progress. "You're doing great," she said after the examination. "About 6 centimeters dilated. We're in the home stretch now." But an hour later, the monitors started beeping urgently. Nurses rushed in, their practiced calm taking on an edge of concern. Dr. Frost appeared moments later, studying the readouts with a frown. "The baby's heart rate is dropping," she said quietly. "Not drastically, but enough to worry me. We need to prepare for a possible C-section if it doesn't stabilize." Archer felt his own heart plummet. "What does that mean?" "It means the baby might be in distress. Could be the umbilical cord, could be positioning. We won't know until we see." Dr. Frost turned to Iris, whose face had gone white with fear. "I want you to stay calm. Stress makes everything worse. We're going to monitor closely, and if we need to move quickly, we will." The next hour was the longest of Archer's life. He watched the monitors obsessively, saw the baby's heart rate dip and recover, dip and recover. Iris was exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and fear. She'd stopped talking, conserving her energy for the contractions that came harder and faster now. "I'm scared," she whispered during a brief respite. "I know, but you're not alone." Archer leaned close, his voice steady despite his own terror. "Whatever happens, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. But if it does..." Her eyes locked on his, desperate and pleading. "Promise me you'll take care of her. Promise me she'll know she was wanted, that she was loved, that she mattered." "I promise." The words came out fierce, certain. "But you're going to be here to tell her yourself. You're going to be fine. You're both going to be fine." At 4 o'clock, Dr. Frost made the decision. "We need to do the C-section now. The baby's heart rate isn't recovering as quickly as I'd like, and we can't risk waiting any longer." Everything happened fast after that. Nurses prepping Iris for surgery, anesthesiologist explaining the spinal block, Archer being handed scrubs and a surgical mask. They wheeled Iris down bright hallways to the operating room, Archer jogging alongside the gurney, still holding her hand. "Don't leave me," she begged. "Never." He squeezed her fingers. "I'll be right there the whole time." In the OR, they positioned him at Iris's head, behind the curtain that blocked her view of the surgery. He held her hand and talked to her, keeping up a steady stream of reassurance, even as his own heart hammered with fear. "Tell me about the hardware store," she said, her voice slurred from the anesthesia. "Tell me something normal." So he did. He told her about the creaky front door and the ancient cash register, about Mrs. Henderson who came in every Tuesday for birdseed, about the time his father had special-ordered pink hammers for a women's construction class. He talked about anything and everything except what was happening on the other side of the curtain. He felt the moment they made the incision. Iris tensed, though she couldn't feel pain, just the pressure and pulling. He watched her face, saw the fear and trust and exhaustion written there, and loved her with a fierceness that surprised him. This daughter he'd known for barely a month had become as essential to him as breathing. "Almost there," Dr. Frost called from beyond the curtain. "I can see the head." Archer held his breath. Iris's eyes were closed, tears leaking from the corners, her lips moving in what might have been prayer. Then a sound he'd never thought he'd hear again, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. "It's a girl," Dr. Frost announced, and Archer saw the tiny, blood-covered infant held up briefly before being whisked to the warming table where a pediatric team waited. "Is she okay?" Iris's eyes flew open. Why isn't she crying more? Is something wrong? The baby answered with a louder wail, and everyone in the room laughed with relief. She's perfect, the pediatrician called. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good strong lungs. Let me just check her over and then you can meet your daughter. Archer watched them work, saw the tiny baby being cleaned and weighed and wrapped in a blanket. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. 19 inches long, a full head of dark hair. She was beautiful and furious and absolutely perfect. Dad, you want to come meet your granddaughter? The nurse called. He looked at Iris, who nodded despite her exhaustion. Go, tell me everything. Archer walked on unsteady legs to the warming table, where his granddaughter lay, swaddled in white hospital blankets. She'd stopped crying now, her eyes, dark blue though they'd change, staring up at him with the unfocused intensity of the newborn. Hi there, he whispered, and his voice broke. I'm your grandpa. The nurse placed the baby in his arms, and Archer felt something inside him that had been broken start to mend. This tiny life, this perfect combination of past and future, his daughter's child and his grandchild. She was family, blood of his blood, the continuation of everything he'd thought was lost. She's perfect, he called to Iris, absolutely perfect. They brought the baby to Iris then, laid her on her chest for those crucial first moments of skin-to-skin contact. Archer watched his daughter hold her daughter, saw the transformation that happens when a woman becomes a mother. The way Iris's face softened with wonder and fierce protective love. Hello, Dinah, Iris whispered to the baby. Hello, my beautiful girl. I'm your mama, and I love you so much already. Archer stood beside them, one hand on Iris's shoulder, the other gently touching his granddaughter's tiny fist. 3 generations in this moment, the living honoring the dead, the future growing from the past. The surgery took another 30 minutes to complete. Archer stayed with Iris while Dr. Frost closed the incision with practiced precision. Their daughter, their granddaughter, nestled against Iris's chest, making small snuffling sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet operating room. You did beautifully, Dr. Frost said as they finished. Both mother and baby are stable and healthy. We'll move you to recovery, and then to a private room where you can rest. In the recovery area, Archer sat beside Iris's bed while she dozed fitfully, still groggy from the anesthesia. The baby, Dinah Catherine Pembroke, according to the bracelet they'd placed on her tiny wrist, slept in a clear bassinet beside them, occasionally stirring and making those small sounds that seemed programmed to trigger every protective instinct. Archer couldn't stop looking at her. She had Iris's nose, or maybe it was his nose, passed down through generations. Her hair was dark like Dinah's had been. Her tiny fingers were long and delicate, and when she yawned, he saw she had the same slight dimple in her chin that his other daughter had possessed. She's really here, Iris murmured, her eyes still closed. She's really here, Archer confirmed. And she's perfect. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back outside that diner, alone and freezing, and none of this will be real. It's real. He reached over to take her hand. You're safe, the baby's healthy, and you have a family now. All of it's real. Iris's eyes opened then, bright with tears. I've never had this before. Someone who stays, someone who keeps their promises. You have it now, for as long as you want it. They moved to a private room an hour later. Cyrus and Maria arrived shortly after, bearing flowers and stuffed animals and the kind of overwhelming emotion that comes with welcoming new life. Maria cried openly when she held baby Dinah for the first time, and Cyrus kept clearing his throat and blinking rapidly. She looks just like Dinah did, Cyrus said quietly to Archer. Our Dinah, when she was born. I know, Archer's voice was thick. It's like having a piece of her back. Beatrice showed up at dinner time with enough food to feed the entire maternity ward, fussing over Iris and cooing at the baby with practiced grandmotherly affection. That little one is going to be spoiled rotten, she declared. The whole town's already in love with her, and she's only a few hours old. As evening fell and the visitors departed, Archer and Iris were left alone with baby Dinah, who had begun making the fussy sounds that indicated hunger. A lactation consultant came to help Iris with her first attempt at breastfeeding, and Archer stepped into the hallway to give them privacy. He called the few people who needed to know, his nephew and niece, a couple of old friends who'd been following the story. Each conversation ended the same way. Congratulations, joy, the acknowledgement that life had a strange way of bringing unexpected gifts. When he returned to the room, Iris was holding the baby against her chest, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" Archer asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing's wrong." She looked up at him with a tremulous smile. "Everything's right. That's the problem. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be taken away from me. It won't be." Archer sat in the chair beside her bed. "You're allowed to be happy, Iris. You're allowed to have good things." "I don't know how," she admitted. "I've spent my whole life braced for the next disaster. I don't know how to just be happy." "You learn," Archer said softly. "One day at a time, one moment at a time. Right now, in this moment, you're safe and loved and holding your healthy daughter. That's enough." The baby stirred, making small squeaking sounds, and they both laughed at the absurdly endearing noise. "She sounds like a baby bird," Iris said. "She sounds perfect." Archer reached out to touch his granddaughter's tiny hand, marveling when her fingers instinctively closed around his thumb. "Hello, little one. Welcome to the family." Baby Dinah's eyes opened briefly, that unfocused newborn gaze that seems to look through you rather than at you. But for a moment, Archer could have sworn she was looking directly at him, seeing him, knowing him. "Your great-grandmother was named Dinah too," he told the baby, though she couldn't possibly understand. "She was kind and strong and loved with her whole heart. You're named for her and for your Aunt Catherine, your mama's sister, who would have adored you. You come from a long line of remarkable women, and you're going to be remarkable too. Don't forget yourself," Iris said quietly. "She comes from you too. Your strength, your kindness, your ability to see someone who needs help and actually do something about it. I just did what anyone would do." "No." Iris's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. "Most people drove past me that night. You stopped. You saved my life, and in saving mine, you saved hers." She looked down at her daughter. "She wouldn't be here if you hadn't been exactly who you are." Archer felt emotion well up in his chest, gratitude and grief and joy all tangled together. He thought about his wife, his other daughter, the family he'd lost and the family he'd found. About how life could break you open, and somehow, impossibly, that breaking could make room for healing. "I was supposed to save you," he said, "but I think you saved me right back." They sat together in the quiet hospital room as night deepened outside. Baby Dinah dozed against her mother's chest, completely unaware that she was the miracle holding this fragile new family together. Down the hall, other babies cried and other families celebrated. But in this room, there was peace. "Thank you," Iris whispered, "for everything. For stopping that night, for taking me in, for being my father." "Thank you for letting me," Archer replied. "For giving me a second chance at this." He thought about his daughter's journal entry, about her dream of a sister. Somehow, impossibly, she'd known. And now her sister was here, raising a daughter of her own, continuing the family line. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined, but it was better than he'd dared to hope for. Outside, snow began falling again, soft flakes drifting past the window like a benediction. Inside, 3 generations of the Pembroke family rested together, bound by blood and choice and the strange grace that sometimes emerges from grief. The worst was behind them now. Everything ahead was possibility. Spring came to Frost Hollow with the gentle insistence of seasons that refused to be rushed. Snow melted into rushing streams, bare trees budded with green, and the world transformed itself from grey and white to a riot of colour that seemed almost aggressive after the long winter. In the house on Maple Street, similar transformations had taken place. The guest room was now a nursery, painted a soft yellow with white trim, filled with a crib Cyrus had built and curtains Maria had sewn. Iris's daughter's old room had been carefully repurposed. Her important belongings distributed between Iris and a memory box Archer kept in his own room, while the space itself became a combination bedroom and study for Iris. Baby Dinah was 3 months old now, and the house that had been silent for so long rang with her cries, her coos, her gradually developing laugh that sounded like hiccups. She was a good baby, as much as any baby can be good. She slept in reasonable stretches, ate enthusiastically, and seemed to find the world endlessly fascinating. Archer had forgotten how exhausting infants were. The sleepless nights, the constant vigilance, the way every small sound could trigger panic that something was wrong. But he'd also forgotten the joy, the first real smile, the way her whole face lit up when she saw him, the incredible softness of her skin and the miracle of her tiny fingernails. Iris had taken to motherhood with a ferocity that didn't surprise him. She was attentive and protective, reading every parenting book the library owned, calling the pediatrician for every small concern. But beneath the anxiety was a deep wellspring of love that showed itself in how she held her daughter, spoke to her, sang to her in the middle of the night when the world was quiet. "I never want her to wonder if she's wanted," Iris told Archer one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Baby Dinah was asleep against her chest in one of those carrier contraptions that allowed hands-free parenting. "I never want her to feel the way I felt." "She won't," Archer assured her. "Look at how you love her. That child will never doubt she's cherished." The hardware store had become a family business. Iris worked part-time now, bringing Dinah in a playpen behind the counter, greeting customers with the easy warmth she'd developed over the months. The town had embraced her completely. She was no longer the mysterious stranger who'd appeared on Christmas Eve, but Archer's daughter, a member of the community, someone who belonged. Beatrice had more or less adopted them both, appearing with casseroles and babysitting offers, teaching Iris the town gossip and the unwritten rules of Frost Hollow society. Cyrus and Maria visited monthly, and their children had taken to calling Iris cousin, with the casual acceptance of family that simply is. On a warm afternoon in May, Archer stood in the cemetery on the hill, baby Dinah in his arms, while Iris knelt between two headstones. She'd brought flowers, yellow roses for her mother, white lilies for her sister, and she arranged them carefully in the built-in vases. "Hi, Mom," Iris said softly. "Hi, Catherine. I brought someone to meet you." Archer watched his daughter talk to the two women she'd never really known, introducing them to the granddaughter and niece they'd never meet. His throat tightened with emotion, but it was bittersweet rather than purely painful. Grief, he'd learned, didn't disappear. It just made room for other things, joy and hope, and the continuation of love beyond death. "Your granddaughter is beautiful," Iris told Dinah's grave. "She has your eyes," everyone says, "and your stubbornness. She knows exactly what she wants and isn't shy about demanding it." She smiled through tears. "I wish you'd told Dad about me. I wish we'd had more time. But I understand why you were afraid, and I forgive you. I hope you can see us now, wherever you are. I hope you know we're okay." She turned to the other headstone. "Catherine, I read your entire journal. You were kind and funny and so talented. I wish I'd known you. I wish we could have been sisters in life, not just in blood. But Dad tells me about you all the time, and sometimes I feel like I know you anyway. Your niece is named after you, Dinah Catherine. She'll grow up hearing stories about both of you. You'll live on through her." Archer knelt beside Iris, adjusting baby Dinah in his arms so she could see the graves. "Your grandmother and your aunt," he told the baby, though she was far too young to understand. "Two of the strongest women I've ever known. You come from good stock, little one." They stayed until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As they walked back to the truck, Iris took Archer's free hand. "Thank you for bringing us here," she said. "For making sure she knows her family, even the ones who are gone." "Family's important," Archer replied. "The ones we have and the ones we've lost. They're all part of who we are." Back at the house, they fell into their evening routine. Dinner, Archer's cooking had improved considerably under necessity, followed by bath time, which Dinah now enjoyed immensely, splashing and giggling at the water. Then story time, rocking, and the gradual wind down towards sleep. Archer watched Iris put her daughter to bed, singing the lullaby Dinah used to sing to their Iris all those years ago. The continuity of it struck him. The same melody passed through generations, the same love expressed in the same simple words. When Iris emerged from the nursery, she found Archer in the living room with 2 cups of tea, the evening ritual they'd developed. They sat under Dinah's quilt, comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes with family. "I was thinking," Iris said, "maybe we should take a family photo. Update the ones on the mantel." Archer looked at the collection of frames, his parents, his wife, his first daughter, decades of Pembroke family history. And now, space for new memories, new chapters, new life. "I think that's a perfect idea," he said. The next week, they took that photo. 3 generations together, baby Dinah in Iris's arms, Archer's hand on his daughter's shoulder. When the picture came back and was placed on the mantel, it completed something that had been incomplete for too long. Some people believe that kindness is a choice, but Archer Pembroke knew better now. Kindness was instinct, was survival, was the thread that tied broken people back together. On a Christmas Eve, when he'd stopped for a stranger, he'd saved her life. But in doing so, she'd saved his right back. Outside the window, Frost Hollow settled into another peaceful evening. Inside, a family that had been fractured across decades and sealed by secrets was finally beautifully, undeniably whole. And in the quiet moments before sleep, Archer could almost hear Dinah's voice, his first daughter's laugh, giving their blessing to this impossible, perfect second chance at everything he'd thought he'd lost.